to do is we're going to move on to the administration of Harry S. Truman and the Korean War. And before we get into this profile on Harry S. Truman, I'm just going to recap some things. You write down what you want. But I thought you should know a little bit about this guy that really nobody knows much about, other than he's the guy that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now you got to remember, I thought Harry Truman was kind of old, until I read recently, and I knew this for a while. But anyway, Harry S. Truman took over the presidency. We know this after the death of Franklin Roosevelt, and when he took over the presidency, he was 60, which I am now. So anyway, I'm starting to feel it. Now, here's some things that are interesting. Do you realize that Truman only served 82 days under President Roosevelt before he became president himself? Less than 3 months. And you know how many times he met with Roosevelt personally during that 82 days?
3 times.
Twice. He only met with him twice. So here's a guy that served as vice president for 82 days. He was a good senator. But as far as the executive office, he served as vice president for 82 days. And he only met with Roosevelt twice during that time. We know that less than 4 months later, the new president made the fateful decision to drop the atomic bomb on Japan in an attempt to put an end to World War II. We also know that that decision by Harry S. Truman saved the lives of an estimated 1 million American soldiers who would have been killed if Japan had to be taken by normal military force. Not to mention probably 2 million Japanese soldiers, and who knows how many civilians, men, women, and children. Whose lives were saved by that decision, despite the fact that 140,000 people were killed. Now, once the war is over, President Truman is going to face a tremendous challenge. We've talked about this before. To transform the American economy from a wartime to a peacetime production. That's very difficult to do because we all know that after a war, production goes down. People lose jobs. Prices go up. And it's always a big challenge for any president who has to transform the American economy from a wartime production to a peacetime production process. Very difficult to do. So he's not, this guy took over and inherited the end of a world war. Now he's got to try to transform us from wartime production to peacetime production. And before he gets done with his presidency, he's going to be involved in another war known as the Korean War. So this guy did not have an easy time as president. Well, let's tell you a little bit about this guy from start to finish so you know a little bit more about Harry S. Truman. Excuse me. Harry S. Truman was born in Lamar, right here it is, Lamar, Missouri, on May 8, 1884. Harry S. Truman was born in Lamar, Missouri, on May 8 of 1884, and was the oldest of 3 children. So Harry S. Truman is born in Lamar, Missouri, on May 8, 1884, the oldest of 3 children. His father, John Truman, was a farmer and a livestock trader. His father, John Truman, was a farmer and a livestock trader. And his mother, Martha, was a stay-at-home mom. And his mother, Martha, was a stay-at-home mom. His dad, again, a farmer and livestock trader. His mother, Martha, a stay-at-home mom. Now, Harry Truman was named after his uncle, Harrison Young. Most of you probably, I don't know everybody's situation, and of course, times have changed, but during the older times, and maybe still today, when children are born, they're usually given a name that matches up with some family member. Not everybody, but middle name, middle initial, first name, who knows, okay? And Harry was named after his uncle, Harrison Young. But he was not given a middle name, he was just given a middle initial of S. He did not have a middle name, just a middle initial. Anybody want to guess why he was not given a middle name? Taking into consideration, lots of times names come from family members. Why wasn't he given a middle name? Anybody want to guess? What? Say, no, you might be right. That's a good guess, but not right. No, that's a good guess, not right. What do people name their kids after lots of times? Either Like if a boy's born, he's either named after his father or his
grandfather.
Well, Harry Truman's grandfathers both had the first name that started with S. And rather than offend one or the other by naming him after one or the other, they just gave him the middle initial S. See, there's good. Think about that when you have kids. If you've got grandfathers on both sides, either don't name them after either or give them the old middle initial. But what are the chances that the two grandfathers would have the same initial anyway, right? But that's what they did. So he was named after his uncle Harrison Young and was given the middle initial S only because his parents wanted to please both of his grandfathers, each who had S in their name. Well, in 1890, when Harry was just 6 years old, his family moved from Lamar, Missouri to Independence, Missouri. And that's where he grew up, that's where he went to elementary school, that's where he went to high school, that's where he graduated from high school. So at the age of 6 in 1890, Harry Truman moves from Lamar, Missouri to Independence, Missouri, where he attends both elementary school and high school, eventually graduating from Independence High School in 1901. Have you? Independence? Yeah, I've been there too. He's got a great library. Ever seen it?
My great-grandparents used to live there.
Did you go to the library? You're probably too young, but it's awesome. Now, what did Harry Truman want to do after he graduated from high school? He really wanted to go to West Point, the Army Military Academy, because his hero was Andrew Jackson, who we spent a lot of time last year on. And he wanted to be a commander in battle just like Andrew Jackson, his military hero. So he set his sights on the military academy. But he didn't get in, Naya. You know why? You're a perfect example right now of why you didn't get in.
He was too short.
No, Leighton,
Poor eyesight.
he had poor eyesight. He had glasses, which was unusual. Now, it's not unusual for Naya. But look at the presidents. How many of these presidents do you see that have eyeglasses on? I think you got Theodore Roosevelt over there, right? And Woodrow Wilson. And then you got to come all the way over here to Harry S. Truman. So eyeglasses weren't something normal you see in a president. His eyesight was poor. And because of that, he could not get into West Point. Now, college was also out of the picture, and according to Caitlin Cottrell last period, he must not have went to college because he couldn't see it. Not true. He didn't go to college because he couldn't afford it. Okay? It was a nice little pun she came out with. Third period was good. So college is out of the picture. His father went bankrupt after investing his money in a failed agricultural risk. The family had no money, couldn't go to college, couldn't go to West Point because of his eyesight. So Nick, where'd he go? Not yet. Good guess, though. He went to work. Thank you, Ron. He went to work. And what he did is he basically worked on his family farm for the next 11 years to help the family out. They got no money. And he not only works on the family farm for 11 years, he also gets other jobs such as a timekeeper for the Santa Fe Railroad and also worked in the mailroom of the major newspaper in Kansas City called the Kansas City Star. So he's no shirker. He can't get into West Point. He doesn't have any money for college. So he decides he's going to work and help the family. He works on the family farm for the next 11 years. Also gets part-time jobs as a timekeeper for the Santa Fe Railroad. Also works in the mailroom of the Kansas City Star. And just spends the next 11 years of his life helping his family out financially. Okay? Well, finally, in 1916, he decides to go out on his own, and he and a couple of his buddies start an oil drilling company. This is an interesting story of success or failure. So in 1916, Harry Truman gets away from the family farm, decides to go out on his own, and he and a couple of his friends decide they're going to start an oil drilling company. So they invest their money in that oil drilling company. They get on a piece of land and they drill down 1,200 feet, which is quite a ways, to no avail. They drill down 1,200 feet to no avail. Don't find any oil. So what do? Nick? Well, they don't. They actually just quit. It's a good guess. They quit. Unfortunately, if they'd have gone down a little farther, they would have hit enough oil where all of them would have been millionaires.
That is crazy.
That sucks.
But they didn't go down far enough and missed a chance to be set for life. So unfortunately, they need to drill a little farther. If they would have all been millionaires. That's bad luck.
Did they know that, or was that like found out after?
Later, yeah, yep. Now, what does he do next? Well, what's happening in the world about 1917? World War I. And when World War I breaks out and the United States enter, Truman volunteers for action. You can't get in through West Point, but he volunteers for action. Now, there's also requirements to get in the armed services in those times. And one thing, if you were going to go into combat, especially if you even got in, was an eyesight issue, right? He's got poor eyesight. So what's he do to get in, Mackenzie, despite his poor eyesight? Think about it. What would he do to get in? He's going to have to take an eye test to get in. How's he going to get by that? Well, you call it cheating if you want. What do you do? Anybody?
Right.
Memorize the chart.
That's cheating.
He memorized the chart. Is that cheating or intelligence?
That is cheating.
Yeah, he memorized the chart so he could pass the eye test so he could be admitted into the Army. Memorize the chart.
Should have done it before.
Memorize the chart. Yeah, he probably should have done that when he was thinking about going into West Point. Evidently the idea came up later, right? Now, he would have a successful career. He would eventually earn the rank of captain, and he would inherit an artillery unit called Battery D. Does that ring a bell? Battery D. Remember in the Civil War there was a Battery D we talked about, right? Is that B? Well, there had to be a D too. But anyway, Battery D. Now, the trouble with Battery D, Ryland, was that it was full of about 200 undisciplined guys who had actually run off 3 other commanders with their horrible discipline and attitude. So Battery D is a very poorly disciplined group. They had broken 3 other commanders before Captain Truman was put in charge. Now, Harry Truman was a pretty slight guy, kind of a nerdy looking guy with glasses, and so you'd think this wasn't a very good match. Well, the first time that Captain Truman addresses Battery D, he says to the 200 men, quote, "I didn't come here to get along with you fellas. You are all going to get along with me." So he put his foot down right off the bat when he met with them the first time. And he said, I didn't come here to get along with you fellas. You're going to all get along with me. So that worked for a while. He had them kind of fooled. But the test is still going to come during combat in World War I. You guys remember, maybe vaguely, when we talked about World War I, the Battle of Meuse-Argonne, one of the major battles in March of 1918? Well, Captain Harry S. Truman and Battery D were in the thick of it at Meuse-Argonne. And things started looking bad for Battery D. They were getting assaulted horribly by German forces. And without his permission, what does Battery D do? Because things are not looking good. Retreat. They start to retreat. Now they're used to a fairly calm-mannered guy, slight guy with glasses, kind of a nerd-looking guy. And as he watches Battery D retreat back without his orders, he stands right in front of him and throws every cuss word possible at him, goes crazy, yelling, screaming, and cussing to the point they're going, "Holy smokes, this isn't the guy we know." And what'd they do? Turn around and went back. Okay? So, in March of 1918, Captain Harry S. Truman was commanding Battery D at the Battle of Meuse-Argonne. His men began to retreat under heavy fire from the German army. Normally a quiet commander, Captain Truman begins to scream at the top of his lungs, cursing and pushing his men back into the fight. The men, who are very surprised to see the actions of their commander, do turn around and continue their mission. And when the fighting ended at the end of the day at Meuse-Argonne, not one life from Battery D had been lost. Not one had been lost. So when the fighting ended, Battery D had survived with not one loss of life. And that from that point on, Captain Truman's men loved and respected him, and one was quoted as saying that I would follow him to the gates of hell if I needed to. I would follow him to the gates of hell if I needed to. So he became a very successful commander in World War I, highly respected. I would follow him to the gates of hell if I had to. Well, 6 weeks after returning back to independence from World War I, on June 28, 1919, what does he do? Gets married. That's right. He marries his childhood sweetheart, Elizabeth Wallace, better known to family and friends as Bess, B-E-S-S. So, on June 28th of 1919, 6 weeks after returning from the war, Harry Truman marries his childhood sweetheart, Elizabeth Wallace, better known to friends as Bess. Unfortunately, Elizabeth has 2 miscarriages, but finally gives birth to a daughter, Mary Margaret, whom they refer to simply as Margaret, which turns out to be their only child. So after 2 miscarriages, Bess Truman is able to give birth to a daughter, Mary Margaret, whom they referred to simply as Margaret Truman, their only child. Well, now what's he got to do after he gets back from World War I, Andy? Got to find a job. Well, he decides not to find a job. He decides that he's going to invest all of his money in a men's clothing store with his best friend, Eddie Jacobson. Okay, so he gets back to independence, and he and his best friend, Eddie Jacobson, are going to buy into this men's clothing store, which actually was going to be in Kansas City. So after his marriage to Bess, Truman decides to invest all of his money into a men's clothing store in Kansas City with his best friend, Eddie Jacobson. Well, after the war, we have a post-war recession. Things don't go well, and the business fails, and the 2 men still owed a lot of money from the loan they took out to start this business in the first place. So they put all the money they had into it, which wasn't enough, then borrowed money to build this clothing store, and all of a sudden it goes belly up because of the post-war recession. What would most people do at this time? Say it. They had a girl. They would file bankruptcy, which means that your credit goes bad, but what? You don't pay off the loan, right? You file bankruptcy, you can't get blood out of a turnip, right? Well, Truman wouldn't do that. He would not take the easy way out and declare bankruptcy. He simply pledged to pay back his part of the loan, and it took him 15 years.
15 or
15 years to repay that money that he could have easily walked away from by declaring bankruptcy. Chose not to do it, chose not to take the easy way out, the honorable way out, and ended up paying back that loan over 15 years. 15, 1-5, yep. What did he get for his money for 15 years of payment? Nothing. Not a thing. But he did not take the easy way out. So, now who was that? What did he do next? And I said, hold that thought. Who said that right off the bat? Somebody I said, which one? Oh, politics. He went into politics. And he went into politics right after his failed business endeavor. That's when he made the move into politics. And his first election, his first thing he ran for was county judge of Jackson County, Missouri. He ran for county judge of Jackson County, Missouri. And that was in 1923, and he was successful. He was elected in 1923 to be the county judge of Jackson County, Missouri. And he served in that position for 10 years, from 1923 to 1933. So his first political position was that of a county judge in Jackson County, Missouri, which he was elected to in 1923, and he served 10 years in that position until 1933. Well, in 1934, he was elected to the United States Senate representing the state of Missouri, and he served in that capacity for 10 years until 1944. So and he was elected to the United States Senate in 1934 and served 10 years in the Senate until 1944. Why did he quit the Senate in 1944, Larry?
To run vice president.
That's exactly right, to run as vice president under Franklin Roosevelt. Now, is anybody in here, I don't know what you guys gays think about, probably girls, you fellas do, but anyway, I thought to myself, how does Harry Truman, little known Harry Truman, get to run for vice president under probably the most popular president in the history of our country? How did he get that gig? Well, he must have done something in the Senate that got people to notice him. And he did something kind of interesting. They had established a committee in the Senate during World War II because they thought that they were not spending money wisely in the production of war goods. They were wasting money in these factories. They weren't doing it very efficiently. So they established this committee to see if they could better organize the factory system and not spend as much money. Well, he got elected chairman of this committee to look into the wasting of money during wartime production. And by the time they got done with their studies and taking action, they saved the United States government $15 billion. So that $400 billion price tag on World War II would have been $415 billion if Truman doesn't come through with this committee work and give them a better way to produce wartime goods without wasting money. I don't know the details on what they were doing, but they saved $15 billion. Well, that put him on kind of the national scene. So in 1944, Roosevelt chose Senator Truman